welcome back, everybody. This is round 2 of the Two Recruiters in the Microphone. I am your co-host, Pete Cochran. I am here with
Israel Swanson, recruiter number 2.
Recruiter number 2, recruiter number 1. Either one. We're just two recruiters. We don't cause numbers.
Yeah, we don't.
It's just us.
Yeah, we're equals.
we're just two dudes sitting around. So for all those that are new to the program, Two Recruiters in a Microphone is a podcast that is dedicated to entrepreneurs, executives, founders, co-founders, technologists, whatever it may be. This is where we actually have a chance to sit down and talk to some of these people that are way smarter than Israel and I are, but then also just get to hear their stories and share that with you.
Yeah,
so it's really important.
I would say, along with those titles that Pete said, industry disruptors, influencers, yes. People that have had an idea and they've saw it through to its fruition that's impacting how we function in our day-to-day lives.
Yep, absolutely. So that's a good segue. So our next guest, our second guest, is Michael Morales, who is the CEO of RF Smart here based in Jacksonville with operations globally. I've had the pleasure to work with that organization in the past as an employee, and they're honestly one of the best companies that I've had the pleasure in working with. And also working under Michael as a leader, he was very inspiring to me, and it was an honor to actually have him on the program. And so hopefully today we'll walk through his journey, his path to becoming the CEO, and we'll hear a little bit more about what he did to get there. And then we'll also spend some time talking about his dad, who actually started the company. So we've got a little funny story at the end, so I hope you enjoy it. All right, here it goes. We're going to have Michael Morales. Thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah.
All right. So today we have Michael Morales with us, the CEO of RF Smart. So thank you so much for coming on.
I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I heard from a very reputable individual that you lost sleep over this.
This is true.
Yeah.
When I saw this on my calendar, I was giddy.
Yeah,
It's such a great opportunity to spend time with Israel and Pete.
Called. Yeah. Said you got
excited
you got the invite.
Definitely excited to be here.
No, this is awesome. Thank you so much. So go ahead and get started. So we're going to talk about a couple different things, but one thing I really just want to start with the journey of Michael Morales. Tell me a little bit about where you were born, how you got to where you are.
Sure. I was born in Houston, Texas. My father was actually born in Havana, Cuba, and left Cuba when he was a middle schooler, when Fidel Castro was coming in to take over the country. And my dad and mom met at Florida State, and my dad got a job at Shell Oil Company in Houston in the 70s. And so I was born in the late 70s in Houston, and my dad was in tech in the 70s with Shell. So the very early days of what we might call ERP systems today. He was in that kind of business back with Shell Oil Company. And then in 1980, they moved back to Jacksonville, where my dad had gone to high school. So I grew up here in Jacksonville, Florida. And I'm an only child, so that was unique. Other than that was my life. I didn't realize how unique it was, but grew up here in Jacksonville and went off to college at Vanderbilt University in Nashville. And
it's kind of a good school.
It
somewhat
was
of a reputation, I hear.
I've never heard of it. Yeah. Never heard of it.
It was a lot easier to get in back then than it is today.
And that was when Nashville was still small, because it's an absolutely gigantic city now.
That is true.
Yeah,
that is
unrecognizable
true.
now. So
it really was. And Vanderbilt's just a couple miles from downtown. Campus. So, but I went off to Vanderbilt and really enjoyed it. Was an economics major. Just knew I wanted.
That was my major.
There you go.
Yeah. And here I am doing a podcast. I don't know, how that happened.
And I'm in the software business.
That's right. Yeah, we all kind of have those points.
Yeah, right? Yeah. And so out of Vanderbilt, I went into corporate and investment banking in Atlanta, Georgia with SunTrust Bank.
Okay.
SunTrust Robinson Humphrey was the investment banking side. And got into a lot of financial analysis and modeling and so forth. And it was impactful for me a couple ways. Number one, the culture within this group, I was in this real estate investment banking group. It was a great team culture there. And this was right out of college. I hadn't thought much about business and culture. I was just like, give me a good job, which I guess will be good for my resume and I'll learn some things. But the managing director who ran that group was just a great guy. I still remember we would always do the Christmas party at his house. And we would do this big white elephant gift exchange. And the main gift was a weekend at his lake house. And anyone could win that. My wife and I never did win that, but that was just so cool. Yeah. We did a retreat at his lake house, and I was at a big company. I mean, SunTrust, which is now Truist, big company, but it was a very personable culture. Right. I also remember getting tough feedback a couple times, but it was done in a caring, honest way with people I had relationship with. I remember the managing director was really passionate about work-life balance, and this was back kind of 2001, 2002.
Right, when there really wasn't any of that. It was like work hard every day.
And corporate and investment banking, that was like
all the time.
You work. And we were only in Atlanta. We weren't in New York. But he modeled going home early. And so that was impactful. And then the other thing that was impactful is I realized I don't really want to do this for the rest of my life. My wife and I wanted to go back to Jacksonville. And so I called my dad and I said, Dad, can I get a job at the company? And it wasn't super strategic. It was like, this is a great opportunity to get back to Jacksonville. Right. And it is cool that my dad is a business owner and so forth. And I had grown up around the company because the company was founded in 1982. So I knew I liked the people in the company, wasn't really enamored with technology, but knew I liked the people, knew I loved my dad and really respected him. And my dad gave me some great advice. He said, yes, of course. You can definitely work
Come
here.
On down
you can do it. But he said, why don't you get your MBA first? He said, I never got a formal business education. I'm entrepreneurially trying to run this business. Right. I think that would be really wise. And I fortunately was just very like, sure, awesome. My wife and I loved being in Atlanta. We had great friends there. We really were engaged with our church. And between Georgia Tech and Emory, there are two great business schools to apply to.
Never heard of them.
So I
once again, you keep dropping these school names. I don't think they exist.
It's a little shady, but
not to cut you off, but I am curious. Growing up, your whole life surrounded by tech, your dad running a technical company, and then you saying, you know what? I want to do something way more exciting than tech, like economics. Like that's what I want to do. Like, so what was the draw to economics at Vandy before? Yeah, just
into it.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I graduated college 2000, so we can think about the 2000.com. I remember using AOL mail in high school and so forth.
Yeah.
So
you
tech,
got mail.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that thing.
That's it. That's it.
Yep.
So I definitely was not like cutting edge, early adopter. Oh, this is the future. Oh, the internet is going to change the world. I'm not anyway going to sit here and say, oh, I saw all of that. I think choosing Vanderbilt, I was trying to get into the best school I could. And that was a great opportunity. Right. Probably major wise at Vanderbilt, there certainly wasn't a tech major at the time. It was like, well, what do you do? Well, you could do engineering. That was not me. Economics was a good fit.
Okay.
Did you choose that major pretty much right away, or did you go through? Because I went through at least 8 or 9 different majors before I landed.
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Okay.
I think I can be pretty practical, and it was like, okay, I know I need to graduate with something I really want to use. Vanderbilt doesn't have business majors, so what's the closest?
Okay,
People
there
do
it is.
economics at Vanderbilt.
Okay.
You can do business minors, and I did do a minor to take some business classes, but that's the major that is most common.
There you go.
Okay.
But also, my dad was, I did do a summer internship between my junior and senior year at college at the company. And it was
wow.
it was incredibly boring.
Okay.
I was on like the finance and accounting team, and I did collections, like accounts receivable collections, which
fascinating stuff.
I really appreciate the people that I work with who do that.
Totally.
I even had to, we had more customers in the Jacksonville area at the time. I even drove to a customer's to pick up a check one time. That's what I was doing in the internship. And I'm like, these people are really nice, but the work is really boring. So I didn't have this huge, I love this company. I can't wait one day to work here. At the same time, when I called my dad in 2002, 2003, I did have a perspective. I'm probably not going to be in accounts receivable. Like there's probably more opportunity here.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So I call him. He says, yes. He says, you should go to graduate school. So I applied to Georgia Tech and Emory. We didn't want to leave Atlanta. I was the 25-year-old kid who had his dad come to accepted student weekend to help me pick which school. And I'll be honest, there's a little, it wasn't deceit. My dad knew what was going on, but if it was going to be Emory, Georgia Tech, I was in state by then, so extremely affordable, Emory private school. If it was going to be Emory, I wanted my dad to chip in. And so it was nice. Welcome Student Weekend was the same for both schools. So he came up to Atlanta. We did Georgia Tech. We did Emory. After that weekend, we talked about it. He's like, Georgia Tech, really strong in technology, great in supply chain. I'm in supply chain software. He's like, this is this is the fit. And I'm like, all right, Georgia Tech it is. So in fall 2003, I started and did a 2-year full-time MBA program at Georgia Tech. I was really fortunate to go to graduate school like that, where I knew where I was going to go work. And so I was able to focus not on maximizing my grade point average to attract some consulting firm or something like that,
right,
and really focusing my curriculum on where I was going to go. So I was taking a lot of technology, a lot of supply chain. Also being at Georgia Tech, I even audited a graduate level class in industrial engineering on warehouse optimization.
Oh, wow.
Not something, you would think the average kid's going to do.
You're
but
the
for
one
me,
person in the class. Yeah.
So I'm there with all these engineers who are getting all this warehouse data and where do you put all the products in the warehouse? And I'm just auditing and listening. They're going to write the software that's going to optimize this. But it was great. And they had an operations club. And every Friday you didn't have class, but I'd go visit warehouses all around Atlanta. And I went to the BMW factory in South Carolina and saw the robots. Yeah. We did Coca-Cola. We did up in Dalton is all the carpet. And so I went to all these warehouses, took a lot of technology. And so graduating.
Were you a full-time student? Or were
I
you
was. I did a full-time 2-year MBA program. It's very fortunate. My dad helped put me through school. And then my wife was working at Coca-Cola.
Okay.
And so we would literally carpool. She'd drop me off at graduate school. She'd work all day and pick me up. So it wasn't a college experience. It was a graduate student kind of experience, working 9 to 5 and then getting picked up and heading back to the suburbs and living the married life.
There you go. So right after that, so graduating from there, then you came back down to Jacksonville.
Yes. And that's where I think I also realized another big benefit of the advice my dad gave me is I got to mature a couple more years before coming into my dad's business. So I was now 27 and I showed up at the company and to be perfectly candid, can I be candid with you, Israel and Pete?
Absolutely.
For the next
Not
5 minutes.
Okay. I really thought my dad was perfect. He's my hero. I loved him so much, seen him do great things with the company. And so I showed up at the company and on the positive side, I think I did a good job of listening and asking questions and just trying to assess what are people's experience with the company.
What was the size of the company then?
my guess is maybe around 60 people or
Okay.
something.
Okay.
And so,
What was the first title? What was your first job?
oh gosh, I mean, the funny story is, so my dad knew I was. So hopefully he won't listen to the podcast, but this is the truth, Dad. This is the truth. If you listen to this, so he knew for about 2 years when I was going to show up.
Right.
So I show up July 2005, and literally for the first 2 weeks, he does not have a specific job for me. I'm on the payroll, so I'm
getting paid.
okay,
Right.
but I literally don't have a job.
A job.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
And so
I show up every day. I don't know what I'm doing, but
so
sure.
those first 2 weeks were slow.
Yeah.
All I can think of right now is one of my favorite movies of all time, Tommy Boy, when Chris Farley comes back to the family the family company, and he just goes into his office, and there's the little fridge, and he has no clue what he's doing. He's
like playing with the fan, isn't
right?
he? Like you going into the fan
Yeah.
too. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, I can even make it worse. Of like the company was out of office space, so I was sitting in someone else's desk as they were traveling, and I knew my dad loved me and was excited about it. But for different people and like their planning, we were not like the family business of we have the 5-year plan of Michael's arrival. Right. It was like Michael showed up, and so after 2 weeks. Evidently, there were meetings that I wasn't aware of, and it came out that I was going to be put in sales. And like any new MBA graduate, I immediately said, well, I don't know anything about sales. You need to put me in training, even though I'd been in graduate school for 2 years. So I went back.
Yeah.
I went back and got into sales training right away, but I was given a territory to sell RF Smart between Texas all the way up to Montana. And I started getting into CRM and seeing deals we'd been chasing, prospects and cold leads. And I just started off in sales. Yep.
Wow. What did you like about sales? What was the most challenging aspect of kind of going into training, getting out of it? Because we were all in sales. So.
Yeah. I think the most challenging for me was getting started on the phone, doing cold calling.
Oh, yeah.
Asking difficult questions about competition and where we stand and your budget. Those were the things. I loved being in person, doing the demo, the presentation. Like I was very energized by that, but calling and starting from scratch and leaving lots of voicemails. And I did
Cold calling is not fun. Not
at all.
It was not something I was great.
Right. So you started. How long were you in sales before just kind of going?
Yeah, I was there probably about a year, and then I made one of my first significant kind of career decisions. Before I joined, my father had bought a small business called Aquential Technologies and absorbed it into, at the time the company was called ICS. We call it RF Smart today. So absorbed it into RF Smart. And the acquisition had not gone well. And after I'd been there a year, the main founder quit and was leaving. And so that was kind of a natural inflection point of like, well, what's the plan now? And I did have a unique opportunity in that obviously I have a good relationship with my dad and could walk in his office and not worry about where I was on the org chart. But I went to him and I said, he had taken that business and kind of taken all the team, sales and product and services and spread them out within RF Smart. And I went to him and said, hey, I think if we're going to turn this around, we need to put it back together like a single business unit. And I'd be willing to lead it. And I think he thought, you're not very smart, are you? And I wasn't. I really wasn't. But I think he was probably at the point like, it hasn't done that well. Like, what do I have to lose here? And man, I'd love not to deal with this headache. So go for it. Right. And so he did. And one of the first things is about half of the team or so lived in Wichita, Kansas. And so one of the first things I did was fly out to Wichita to meet the team. I'd probably had a little interaction with them, but not much. And I remember being on the small Delta flight from Atlanta to Wichita. And I'm like looking back through my business school books on leadership and stuff like, how am I going to do this? Here's the owner's son showing up. They've had they've been acquired. It hasn't gone well. Like the founder just left. Like this is not like the best situation.
No.
So I think I was smart knowing that this was tenuous. And I was rather ill prepared to go through it. But in some ways I had a humble perspective about it to get started and try to turn the business around.
How many people were there at that time?
There might have been maybe 8 or 10 in that business.
And so they were all. It must have been so nervous.
Yeah,
kind of just interact with you and not know really what's going to happen.
Right? Yeah,
come in and shut it down.
Sure. Yeah.
So how did you get them behind, like herding cats, as they say? Right?
Yeah. And I would love to tell you it all worked out in a beautiful bow, but it didn't. But there were some positives. I think the biggest thing, especially that I would kind of highlight early in my career at RF Smart, and hopefully very much in my career for many years to come, is I think I did a decent job of asking questions, being curious, and not coming in with, well, I know the answer. That's one of the things I love about being in tech in general is I don't write code. I'm not a consultant. Right. I'm just a business person who's pretty curious, and I can put some things together if you lead me down a path. And so on the positive side, I think I did a great job of asking questions. What do you all think we want to do? What are the challenges? And one of the big decisions I made is we were trying to sell like 6 or so products. And we were trying to use the RF Smart sales team to sell those products. And what we did is we focused on 2 products, and then we hired our own salesperson and really focused our salesperson on that and didn't rely on the RF Smart salespeople because they weren't waking up every day really trying to sell Equential. And so that was on the positive side. On the negative side, I certainly had a defining moment that I started to realize that the culture in Wichita was really caustic. And ultimately, we saw some communications that they were flowing around the Wichita office that were very offensive towards me and extremely negative. And in some ways, it was certainly very hurtful.
I was about to say humbling.
Yeah, humbling is a great word. Hurtful, maybe even humiliating a little bit. At the same time, it wasn't true, and it wasn't fair. And so I got to go back to Wichita and address it, and fire someone, and someone else did resign, and start to turn that around. And for me as a leader, I definitely grew thick skin at a little earlier age.
Absolutely. Because you asked for this, right? I asked, and then all of a sudden, wow, this is really hurtful.
Yeah. But at the same time, I think maybe that was a defining moment for me of like, I think I have the fortitude for leadership and to wade into some tough situations that it's going to make me stronger.
Right. So from that point, right, you got them back behind everything with RF Smart. And then from there, you just started to take on more responsibility in leadership. Is that fair enough to say?
One of the next big kind of inflection points for me was my dad started to have some health challenges. And, the company was starting to plateau on size and growth, maybe around 80 or 100 or so people. And so combining those, my dad and I was certainly involved in these discussions, but ultimately this was his decision. He decided to do a search for an outside CEO to come run the business. I'd been there maybe 2 or 3 years. Okay. I wasn't, really someone that was considered. There wasn't someone else clear in the business.
And what year is this now?
This is probably 2007, 2008. Okay. So I'd been at the company only 2 or 3 years. And
just before the recession, right? So,
yes, yeah. So the guy who got the job, he got dealt a tough hand. Yeah. And so we hired an executive search firm. Kind of went top end with a good executive search firm. Started interviewing CEOs. To be honest, I was probably kind of starstruck when we interviewed these people. I don't think, and my dad probably would say he didn't interview either. It was more we were trying to sell them on coming to our great family company, and yes, we can afford you, and all this stuff. So we met numerous candidates. We didn't do a great job asking them a lot of questions. Gotcha. We just kind of sold them. And so we ended up
starstruck, right?
Yeah. And we ended up hiring someone who had a great resume, and probably we thought we'd overshot what we even thought we could do. But the combination of, the recession coming 2008, and he had some weaknesses that really started to make themselves apparent. The company didn't do well. And there were a lot of positives in it as well. For me, I started to see a different CEO operate, where my father is a very entrepreneurial CEO, a lot of feel, a lot of I can
emotion.
Definitely emotion, a lot of I can ask a couple questions and get a sense of what's going on, and a lot of desire to get his hands in it. And let's go into the details. The new CEO, when he came in, much more of a scaling type CEO. I have leaders do different things. I'm going to put in metrics, and I'm going to hold my leaders accountable. And so that was a really good experience for me to see a different type of leader. I'd certainly learned about that in graduate school, but in real life situations, my father was my role model. Right. And so I did learn a lot, and how a leadership team meeting was run was so different than how my dad ran it, and a budget and plan for the year, where my dad was more on kind of feel and we'll just keep going. So that was really helpful. And my dad started to learn how to be a chairman with this other guy, not with me in that seat. And so I've never had to do that, of where I've been running a business and now I'm the chairman. And so I'm not in charge, even though I'm the owner. So that was challenging. I'm sure if my dad were sitting here, he'd say that was a challenging time for him.
Like to step away.
To step away.
That he started.
And how to engage with the CEO, what topics and how often to meet and what details, all of that. So my dad cut his teeth on someone else. So in the future, when I took over, he had some experience, and I got to watch it too and say, okay, these are the things that were done well, not done well, and this is what I want to do differently.
So how long was this individual in the role?
Yeah, I think he was in probably 2 to 2.5 years.
Okay. So from 2008 to 2010,
somewhere
around there.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe into 2011.
Okay. And then you followed that. That's when you stepped in right after.
No, my dad came back in.
Okay.
And stepped in. And then at the beginning of 2012, we announced that I would be the CEO in 1 year.
Okay.
So we did a year succession plan.
Okay.
And that was incredibly helpful to have a whole year of starting to participate in different things. I had become an owner in the business, so starting to learn more about those aspects of the business.
100 plus employees at that time?
Yeah, we were probably 100, 120 at that time. And so it was a great year. But one of my favorite stories of that year is the old CEO had introduced us to a corporate psychology firm. And we got to know one of the gentlemen really well, Dr. Bob Johnson, who we still work with Dr. Bob today.
He's actually he's going to be a guest on the show
Fantastic.
Next week. So, yes.
Awesome. Well, I'm a huge fan of Dr. Bob.
As am I. He's a big mentor of mine.
Awesome. And so we had a great lunch with Dr. Bob. And Dr. Bob would read out a category of the business. And my dad would always answer first on a scale of 1 to 10, how independent was Michael allowed to be? So we're really trying to assess CEO versus chairman. What freedom do I have? What do I not have?
Level of trust. Too,
level of trust. And for me, it was really important that if I'm going to have the title of CEO, that I can live that out. I don't want to go into a meeting, say, all right, we're going to make a decision. This is what we're going to do. And everyone,
let me go ask my dad.
Or everyone's like, sure, Michael, we're going to go talk to George about this.
Right.
I couldn't do that. I did also get fortunate that a lot of my dad's leadership team exited the business when my dad transitioned to chairman as well. So I was really able to start over from a leadership team. So that was a lot of that was just fortunate in timing. Strategically, it probably would have been extremely helpful as well. But so we're at this lunch and we get to hiring and firing. And to me, this was a huge one. Like, I don't want to go track my dad down so we can hire a couple people, nor do I want to have to walk him through someone's performance plan and they're not performing and we're going to fire them. And so I think he said Michael has a 9 or 10 on it on the independence level. And that was like the crystal like pop, like, yes, we're on the same page here. Yeah. I really believe he wants me to be the CEO of this business and to act like it. And so we did that. And then January 2013, I became the CEO of RF Smart.
Okay.
And now it's 400 plus employees?
Yeah, we're about 400 people around the world today.
Yeah, so, I mean, just going that big, like from that time to now, like, was that, like, talk to me a little about all the pitfalls, the challenges of that. Now you're leading 100, let's say 150 people. Now you're leading over 400 people globally. Going from that point to the 400, what kind of challenges did you see?
Can I, before you answer that though, you did mention earlier that your dad was your hero and everything like that. And then when you came back to the business and then you saw like, I don't think you were able to finish that thought on, but then, so I want you to finish that thought. And then I want you to fast forward to, what was that relationship like then once you were kind of you did give the that story in regards to I'm going to I've given Michael a 9, but just kind of you are working for your dad's company and you're working for your dad's company for those many years. And what was that relationship like all the way up into like, I do trust my son. And now for that year of teetering back and forth, what would do you get what I'm saying? What was that? How the ebbs and flows of your dad's relationship?
I've got a great story on that one as well. So back to kind of my early days of the company, as you listen to this, probably everyone's going to be like, well, duh, the company's not perfect. And it's easy for me to sit here today and say, the company had issues. The company has issues today. I'm not in any way a perfect leader. But I took it really hard in the early days. I think I did a good job of disarming people, just being curious, asking questions, and not getting emotional or argumentative when someone would complain about the company or share about an issue. But inside, I was churning. I was like, oh my gosh, I thought this company was perfect. And I found myself always wanting to go to my dad, can you fix this? And my dad's not perfect like we all are. And I was more close up to seeing some of his weaknesses. And I really struggled with that in those early days. And I was really grateful that I was 27, not 22 doing that, because it would have been much more devastating. But those early years, I really struggled with that. Fortunately, I kept pressing in with people and didn't shut them down. So I was still very much listening. And I realized I needed to do my kind of own psychological work of, okay, why am I struggling so much? No one's perfect. Everyone has their issues. So that's been a good journey for me as well. So I started to see my dad more like he really is. At the same time, I got to see up close even more what a caring man he is, how much he loved the people at the company. I got to see him go to the hospital when someone was in the hospital, and how much he truly valued people. And that was just an amazing, amazing experience. So our relationship, I think, always had a lot of trust. It was definitely a journey of, I'm not the little son anymore. Like I'm a partner. I'm a strong business leader. Yeah. I'm stronger in some areas. Like that was a good evolution that we went on. And I had some moments where I disagreed with him, that I would take some strong stands on things. And I think that's where it was like, okay, yes, I'm the son, but I'm also the partner, or yes, I'm the CEO. So a funny story of that succession period. So we got this 1-year succession plan. And I remember doing a big call. We're a big partner with Oracle NetSuite. And so this was early days when we're just trying to establish the partnership with NetSuite. And so we're doing a call with them to tell them about RF Smart and our great warehouse software. And I remember saying to my dad before the call, hey, Dad, I'm going to be the CEO in January. How about I lead the call so you can kind of watch how I would do it and so forth. And he's like, sure, yeah, that's a great idea. And so the call starts, and this is the old days of like the conference room phone, and we're just sitting around the table. And so he and I are on the phone in Jacksonville. And so we start off and I start leading. And it's not that physically he took his hand and pushed me back, but verbally, I think I maybe had a few minutes of leading the call, but he just took over. And it was nothing that I had done negatively. That's just my dad's style. Like if I'm going to be in the room, like I am in the game.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, thinking about that after having been with the company 7 or so years, I was in a much different place to say, I love my dad. That's just him being him. He's not trying to be rude to me.
Right.
And that's a challenge for him. He's not naturally going to delegate well. And, you know, that's okay.
And that was okay.
That's okay. He and I have different strengths. I'm going to be more natural at doing that. But it was a classic example of the challenge that he was battling.
Yeah. You just welcomed people on the call and then you took over, right? Basically. Thanks for coming. Okay, cool. I'll take over from here. Just like mute your line. Yeah. So here at 2013 or so.
Yes.
Right? So then there it is. And then going to 400 people. Talk to me a little bit about your thoughts on leadership. I remember attending a class with you one time about authentic leadership.
Yeah.
I remember a lot of those points. I'm just kind of fascinated, for you to be able to do that. What have you learned along the way, and what are your real thoughts on leading that many people? Because that's a huge amount of responsibility, right? So,
yeah. There are numerous things that I've learned along the way. Number one, I was so fortunate to have a wonderful executive team. Mm-hmm. They were people who I'd worked with for years, and they were people who had more potential. And so as we've grown, like they haven't been, oh, I can't keep up. Like they've grown to meet the opportunity. And so our tenure throughout the organization is great, but at the leadership team level is just fantastic. And so I was really fortunate in 2013 that quite a few of the people who are still here today were with us back then, and they were growing and they were getting better, because I'm a big believer in John Maxwell's The Law of the Lid, that a business can't get better than the leadership capabilities of the people at the top. And so we were very focused on, okay, if we can lead well at 150 people, can we lead well at 200?
Right.
What do we need to do different? What do we need to do different at 300? And another, the core concepts that was really impactful for me, I think Andy Grove made it famous, but was kind of the question, what would my replacement do? And I still remember it was our VP of sales at the time, Stephen Morgan, who's now our chief operating officer, who's just a phenomenal person and performer. Mm-hmm. We were sitting in a room doing sales planning for the next year, and we were kind of whiteboarding. And what we whiteboarded was we should hire like 5 or 6 new salespeople. When we did that, we all of a sudden found ourselves saying, we can't hire 5 or 6 salespeople. And it was like, why not? Well, that's a lot of money. And we've never hired 5 or 6 salespeople at one time before. Like we don't do this. And I mentioned that question to Stephen. I said, Stephen, if some private equity people were brought in to take over this company,
right,
and the two of them are sitting here working on sales strategy for the year, and they're looking at the opportunity and our products and what we could do you think they would hire 5 or 6 salespeople? And we were like, yeah, they would, because this is sound logic. We've got a good plan here. And it was like, okay, well, it's a lot of money for us because we just haven't done this, but let's hire 5 to 6 salespeople. And so that's been a question that we consistently have asked as we've grown is, okay, these numbers are bigger. Some of these challenges seem bigger, but what would our replacements come in and do? And if what our replacements would come in to do is something reasonable, it's like, why aren't we doing it? Why are we stuck? Right. Well, I'm scared. Okay, how do I push through that? So that's been really impactful as well. Another one, I had a really profound learning experience early in my career at RF Smart, where the first salesperson for Equential was really struggling. And I would meet with them, and it was like, well, you need to be making more calls to generate opportunities. And he would agree, and was like, okay, how many calls? Well, I probably need to be making 50 a day or whatever. I can't remember the numbers. But we agreed, like, okay, got to make these calls to create the opportunities. And so, after a few weeks, I'd check in, or, checking in weekly. But after a few weeks, it was like, you're still not hitting the number.
Right.
But we agreed on that. And I started to think, this guy's a super nice guy, been at the company a long time,
Right.
but he wasn't performing as a salesperson. And what I knew a little bit about the company, since I'd been there a little while, was people didn't really get fired from the company. My dad, that was too hard. He cared about people so much. And so he didn't fire people. And for me, my view was, we need to let people know a standard, and if they're not willing to meet it or not able to meet it, we're going to make a move, because we have a ton of people counting on us, and not just the people, but their families and so forth.
Right. And clients and everything else.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah. And so, so I fired him, and then I went to hire a new salesperson. Mm-hmm. And my wife, who loves to take credit for this, met Tracy Morgan at like a neighborhood party. And she said, oh, my husband, Stephen, is looking for a job. And so I just mentioned Stephen Morgan, who is now the chief operating officer of our business. But I hired him as my first ever hire for an Equential salesperson. And so that story is so ingrained for me of, no, I never want to be ruthless and just fire someone. But sometimes when we see someone not performing well, we don't think a lot about who might be able to replace this person that can be a difference maker. And now Stephen's been with the business 15 years and a phenomenal person. So what hung in the balance of my decision to let this gentleman go, who, by the way, never sold software again and went into real estate?
Right.
And so I think we freed his future to go do something that he enjoyed much more. Yeah. And it was a huge trajectory changing decision for the business.
It's a passion too. If I'm not happy in the job that I'm doing, I'm not going to perform well, whatever you tell me to do. So it's being able to kind of realize that. And it's very humbling even for an individual to say, I'm not happy doing what I'm doing. Sometimes it takes that, you're not happy, go do something else. And now that you're saying he's doing real estate, he's probably very happy.
Yes.
So he realized, but he needed that moment to kind of come to him, because he probably would still be there.
Yeah.
And not happy and not making 50 calls.
No. So. And everyone would have liked him because he was a super nice guy.
Right. Exactly.
Yep.
So that's on the authentic leadership. So I guess I'll kind of go into really the advice that you have for future leaders, for people that want to go into management.
Or the advice that you would have given yourself.
There you go.
Yeah. A couple things. One piece of advice that I do see sometimes in my career is people wrestling with why I want to go into leadership. What we're looking for at RF Smart is reasons like, I really want to impact people. I really want to see other people be successful. I really want to care for people.
Right. That was what I liked most about working with you in RF Smart, is because you also teaching people that are not even leaders now, but how to be an effective leader. I always found that really fascinating, because a lot of companies will talk about training and building people up, but you guys really seem to embrace it a lot more so. And I might have not any direct reports, but you're going to teach me, if I do, what that's going to be like. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, and that's contrasting versus, well, this is the way to move up. I need to be a leader, or this is the way to get a bigger title or make more money. Don't have any problem with people wanting to grow their compensation and so forth. But ultimately, the deep down why needs to be bigger.
Needs to be authentic.
Yeah.
That they care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I would certainly encourage people, because people can be extremely successful being individual contributors in our business and tons of businesses around the world. So don't try to force it. Make sure you have this why of, I want to celebrate. Like, I love telling that story about hiring Stephen Morgan, because I'm so excited how successful he's been. Like that story gets me jazzed, not because of my great decision. It's like, look what he's done. And so the fact that we've grown to 400 people, I get excited about all the people that have gotten great opportunity about that, not,
Right.
oh, I can go put that on my resume. Because, the other thing I've learned sitting here today is numbers are hollow if they don't have real meaning around them. And so our mission is around transforming customers and changing lives. And so we want to be a company where customers are transformed and people's lives are changed because they've worked at RF Smart. That's what drives real meaning. Numbers, yeah, they can be nice, but they're very hollow without the substance behind them.
Right. That's awesome. That's great. That's a great advice. I am going to say one little story about your dad because I do really love your dad. He's a fantastic man. But I'm going to give a little story on. I was actually having dinner with my father-in-law. This was back in December, like when I was still working with you. And my father-in-law said, how's the new job going? What's the name of the company? I said, it's RF Smart. He said, oh, where are they from? I said, it's been around since 1982. And he was just like, oh, so who's the CEO? And I said, a guy named Michael Morales. This is a true story. So my father-in-law goes, Morales. I used to work with a guy that his last name was Morales. He had a great mustache. And I was just like, oh, well, okay. And I was like, that's an odd thing to say, Papa. And so he goes, I just had a fantastic mustache. His name was George. And I was like, oh, well, George Morales is the chairman. That's Michael's his son. And so he was like, he just sat back in his chair and he goes, is he the same one that worked at Charter?
Yes.
And I said, yes, he is. And he goes, man, I remember in 1982, it was almost like the way that I pictured it is like a Jerry Maguire moment. Like George goes into the office like, who's with me? I'm starting a company. And so my father was joking. He was like, well, how's the company doing? How many employees? And I said, it was like 400. And my father goes, man, I really wish I raised my hand when he actually said,
I wish I would have followed that mustache.
I should have folled the mustache. And then he said, he's like, tell me he still has the stash. Said, no, he doesn't. But it was a fantastic story to me.
That is a great story.
Yeah, because it was and you were probably all but 4 or 5 years old. So
that's right.
That's a really interesting kind of inflection point too for your dad to realize I don't want to do this anymore. And all the impact that he had at Charter, and to go, I'm going to go out on my own and start something with a 4-year-old at home.
Yes.
Obviously we know at that time, George thought with a great mustache comes great responsibility, and he knocked that out of the park.
That is true. That is true. Oh, yeah. That's a great story.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, so my father-in-law still talks about that. So, and I actually, when I talked to your dad about that, and I had said my father-in-law worked with you, and your dad immediately remembered my father-in-law. He said, "Oh yeah, Richard Bliss. I remember him. He was a good guy. He was an AS400 programmer." And I said, "How do you still remember that?"
Yeah, that's impressive.
And he was like, "Oh, it was in the 80s. He has a bunch of kids, right?" And I said, "Yes, he does." Crazy that you still remember that. So yeah. It's awesome. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on with us. I really appreciate it. And thank you, for spending the time with us. So.
Well, thank you, Israel. Thank you, Pete. What a pleasure.
Yeah.
It's been a great conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. All right. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Mike.
Take care.
Thank you. Hey, so that is a wrap for the show. Just really want to spend just a minute and thank Buzzsprout for all the support in utilizing their platform, and of course the Buzzsprout studio in San Marco in Jacksonville, Florida. Thank you to Varick Rossetti for the amazing design and logo that you did. And then also thanks to Rick Collado and Hurricane Party for providing the music that we all have an opportunity to listen to. And then thanks again to all the listeners and the supporters and the family. So couldn't have done this without you.
See you on the next cast.